might kill Allie.
I actually practiced Vipassana meditation for ages, doing breath meditation, but the breaking your body up into little boxes and then making slices. The only one I could really enjoy was the mustache meditation, which you focus on your upper lip. But that one was like very similar to the breath meditation, so it was great. But the other ones were like, hated
I
it.
think that's probably hard to do in such a short amount of time. I mean, that, it's really done over, I guess it's compressed. It's within 10 days, but that's all you're doing for 10 days. And it's more slow steps towards it. So maybe trying to do it in a shorter number of hours doesn't work well for some people.
Eddie, I think
Okay.
you hit the nail on the head, Eddie.
Since we started recording, perhaps we should start. But I just want to say one thing. I think Allie should send Jeffrey a testimonial. It's worth it for the mustache meditation.
Okay, so you all know today we have this imposter called Zubin Damania, aka ZDoggMD. And like many of us along this path, we've said, what? Awake? No, that's a joke. I'm not really. I'm an imposter, right? But come on, if you've listened to his podcasts or Who's Feeling the Pain? Yeah, whatever. We welcome you. We love you. We're looking forward to hearing more about when your wife Margaret woke up and what happened in your experience and anything you fucking want to tell us. Why you stopped doing medicine. You name it. Over to you. Whoops, wait a minute. Already a question, Colette?
We can wait. Let's have Zubin talk first, and then we can
Okay,
go.
Colette.
No question. No question. No question. Sorry.
It was a hand raise misfire.
Hand raise misfire. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
I want to change Zoom's little hand raise icon to just be like that, because it would just be so.
That's an idea.
Yeah, right. Like, I'm raising my hand. Okay, who is this fucking bald guy? Yeah, y'all know that, like, really nothing can be said about anything really that isn't just more of this. But I mean, I guess the quick kind of punchline is, like, I was at Stanford for about a decade doing hospital medicine, and Amy and I were commiserating on medicine before this thing started. And it's an interesting place, the sort of Western medical industrial thing, because it is very much an expression of, which I can only say in retrospect, it's very much an expression of kind of mind identification. We really think that we can reduce this infinity to, okay, here's some check boxes and algorithms and different receptors and things like that. And I really bought into that because I was trying to, ever since I was young, I was trying to figure out what is reality. And so I did that for about a decade and really felt it started to feel incredibly inauthentic. There was no other way to put it. Like, it wasn't me at all. And then I started wondering, like, what is me? Like, I don't even understand what I am anymore. And so that was kind of the first destabilizing thing beyond, trying psychedelics in college. And then, I had this weird thing where I thought, I'm kind of a class clown type. I like music and stuff. Maybe I'll make some videos, because there's this thing called YouTube, and I'll put them on YouTube and kind of see kind of like a cry for help while I'm a full-time physician. This was like 2010 maybe. And so I do that, and it starts to catch on. I thought it would catch on with patients, because I was like, oh, I can kind of educate people with a little humor to try to keep them out of the hospital. But patients didn't give a fuck about what I was saying, because they were just like, this guy sucks. It was other medical professionals who were like, oh, this guy's speaking my language. Like, this aspect of medicine really sucks, or like the way we do this is dumb, or whatever. And so, like, I started making music parodies, like thinking, oh, how can I raise awareness of like testicular cancer and self-exams? And I thought, well, who is a pop icon who consistently grabs his own testicles? And there was only one choice for him. and it was Michael Jackson. And I thought, well, instead of Man in the Mirror, which was one of his big songs, it's like, how about Manhood in the Mirror? And I'll dress up in a robe in my bathroom with a Michael Jackson wig and the glasses, and I'll just grab my nuts repeatedly singing, you know, I'm checking out my nuts in the mirror. And so I did that, and that like kind of went weirdly viral, and it got the attention of this guy, Tony Hsieh, who is the CEO of Zappos, who then had us move to like Las Vegas to build a clinic. And that was the sort of gate to like the identity starting to really unravel, because all this time I thought, oh, I'm this, you know, Stanford doctor with 2 immigrant physician parents. And you know how this whole game goes. Like, you're not going to be an artist. You're not going to be a musician. You're a doctor, and that's it. And anybody else is just a failure. You know, that's like my dad. So suddenly now we're given this opportunity to like, oh, because of these weird videos, like you and your wife, and my wife's a radiologist at Stanford, but she's just starting. And at this time she says, oh, you know, you're so miserable now. Like, this job is going to literally kill you. Like, you won't survive. Like, let's take a few years. We'll go, you know, we'll go to Vegas. We'll try this thing. I'll do teleradiology, even though I don't like it. But I'll stay kind of connected to Stanford in case we go back. And so we did that. And that's when it was in 2012 when I had this just inexplicable thing happen where, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have stories like this, where it's just like, what the fuck was this? That now in retrospect, we say, oh, that was first awakening or whatever that means. I was up in an apartment in downtown Las Vegas with Tony Hsieh, who's a billionaire. How the fuck does that happen? And this woman, Sarah, who many people would just call her the sorceress. And I was like, why the hell do they call her the sorceress? She's like a fashion designer. She like took me shopping for clothes because I was dressing like a total schmuck. Like, and now I'm in Vegas and hanging out with these like people that are, I'm like, who are these people? Like, I'm wearing this like Payless shoes with like Velcro straps and shit. And so they, you know, this woman says, I'll take you shopping, you know, and, you know, I'll give you the principles of how you can dress, because dressing is kind of an expression of whatever your authentic identity is. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So we somehow find ourselves in Tony's master bedroom closet, which of course is bigger than my bedroom. And we're smoking weed, which I haven't done in, I don't know, years and years. And I guess the weed has gotten stronger these days. So I take like one hit, I'm coughing, you know, like I don't know what's going, like I have COVID. And suddenly I'm so fucking high that I can't even speak. And Sarah is suddenly talking to me, like making direct eye contact and doing this, you know, non-dual stare at me and saying, you know, here's what I see in your personality. And I've noticed you make jokes, and, you know, at any chance you get in order to put yourself at ease, you know, what are you frightened of? Like, what happened to you? Like, and she's just going at my ego, which I can only see in retrospect. At the time, I was like, why is this woman who was just my friend attacking me directly? Because that's how it felt. Because all the ego was rising and going, oh my God, like my entire fundamental me is under attack and I'm stoned in a closet, and Tony's just sitting in the corner nodding. And I'm like, fuck, like alpha male's in the corner. This chick is like going at me. And at some point I was just like, I couldn't even speak. I was just like, what is she saying? And because I knew she was right. Like the way she'd assessed my personality, the sort of way that I expressed was spot on, and no one had ever pointed it out. And so that was kind of a crack. Then we go to another room, and now she's pointing at presence. And she's just like, you realize there's nothing that exists outside of this. There's only this. There's only, always, and already this moment. And she says, that's why we're smoking weed right now, because sometimes weed is the only way to get you the fuck out of the future and the past and right here, right now. And I don't know what happened at that point, because she somehow punished my ego into capitulation. It just gave up. And then suddenly this expression of presence was all there was. And I started crying, like all this stuff happened. And I don't even remember a lot of it now. It's been 10 years. But I remember afterwards just going, oh, like all this, everything I thought I was is not so. It's just this. Like, what a relief. Like at the time I was 38, like 38 years of fucking baggage just gone. And so I go to my wife I go home at like 4 a.m. My wife's asleep. She wakes up and I'm just like, I'm still like super emotional. I'm like, I don't even know what's going on, but Sarah fucking got me really high. Maybe I'm still high. I don't know. But I just realized none of this shit matters. And like everything's perfect as it is. And my wife, who just innately has so much presence, but never, no spiritual path, nothing, was just like, she could tell. She's like, oh, wow, you see what's here. Like it was just like a click. And ever since then, it's been a downhill path into just destruction. So that's kind of how the whole thing kind of started. And then ever since then, someone shows me Eckhart Tolle and I listen to that and I'm like, I don't know what this motherfucker's saying. The unmanifest is, the consciousness, and just stay conscious and on the presence. And it made no sense. And yet it made 100% sense. And then I discovered Sam Harris and Waking Up, because I was an atheist. And so Sam was a nice wedge to like, oh, it's okay to explore this stuff. And then I started getting more of the intellectual underpinnings of what it was that happened, still not knowing what that anything had happened. Just suddenly I became interested in this. And yeah, and then that fast forwarded to Angelo and all kinds of shit. But I'll stop talking because I've talked a long time now.
You are here to talk, just in case you didn't know. Wait, you were going to tell us this. That's a great story. I've heard that story and I love it. And yes, many people here have had similar stories. Wait, there was a story you were going to tell us a while ago. Oh, yes. You were speaking to 1,000 people.
Yes. So all of that,
fit?
yeah, that's a good transition. All of that then leads to the last few months where, a couple of years ago, I meet Angelo. He sends me his book. He comes here. Suddenly, like the non-dual aspect of everything becomes much more apparent, and it's really felt. It's not as intellectualized as I had been doing. I was still very much up in my head. And then in the last few weeks, when Suzanne Chang, who has a YouTube channel, Suzanne Non-Duality, came, that's when this really big kind of catastrophic knowing or unknowing kind of happened. And so in that setting of this, where everything kind of just is gone and yet here simultaneously, my wife has this massive sort of shift, which we can talk about, but I am now scheduled from months ago to do one of my in-person performance talks for like 1,000 of America's public health lab people at their association in Sacramento. Now, anybody who knows lab people, as they're like a little bit on the spectrum, very introverted, beautiful, lovely humans that you can't have a conversation with, probably. That's what I thought. This was my impression from dealing with lab over the years. When you call them and so on. Now I show up, so okay, so this is how it goes down. Like, and look, I'm thinking, oh, I'm this awakened motherfucker. Like, there's nobody here to have a problem. Like, it's all good. Like, I can do a talk. Who cares? I didn't prep. I just had my like old arc of like the hero's journey and the health system waking up to and all of this. And so I'm like, oh, it'll be fine. They pick me up in like a chauffeur picks me up at my house and drives me the 2 hours to Sacramento. So I'm sitting in the back of this car, just like being super present, watching this farmland go by. I'm like, oh man, I'm such an awake motherfucker. This is great. There's nobody here. This is wonderful. Show up at the Sacramento Convention Center, and immediately they send me to the AV room, the 1,000-person room, to do the sound check, because I'm performing like 3 songs and as part of the talk arc. And I haven't done a talk in like 6 months or more. So I'm a little rusty, but I'd practiced a little bit in the car and stuff. So I'm like, it'll be fine. The AV guy comes up to me and he's like, hey, did you do a talk for the Foot and Ankle Surgeon Convention back in 2020? And I'm like, yeah, I did. He's like, oh yeah, we did the AV for that. And then it clicked. That was one of the talks, the first talk in the pandemic. And it was a fucking total shit show, train wreck disaster, because we spent an hour the night before getting the tech to work because they couldn't get my slides to work because they can't do the one job they have. That's how I felt at the time. I was so mad. And so we do this hour of thing. And then when the show starts the next day, 1,000 surgeons and none of the slides work. And so I'm on stage and I had a complete like anger just arose. And this was a few months after I met Angelo. And so I'm just feeling rage. And I'd read Angelo's chapters on emotion and all of this. But at this time, it's just pure rage. So they finally get the videos to work. So one video is playing. So I go backstage during this video and I'm just fucking in this guy's face, like at the AV counter, like, you know, like a surgeon yelling at the anesthesiologist, like, you have one fucking job. Like there's 1,000 people. We did this for an hour and it's like nothing was done. Like, what the fuck is wrong? And I could feel like my blood pressure was like 200. And then I go back on stage and I'm sitting there, they're watching this Doc Vader video that I made especially for them, that if it hadn't played, like, where's the talk, right? And I sit down on the stage, like cross-legged, and just feel into the body. Like like Angelo's words are in my head, like, hey, you know, when there's emotion, just feel it raw. So I'm feeling it. I'm like, okay, there's anger. Oh, what's underneath it? Oh my God, it's humiliation, it's shame, it's unworthiness. And so I'm like, I have to let this go right now and come back to it later, because otherwise I'm not gonna be able to do this talk. So I let it go. I do the talk. And towards the end of the talk, I tell 1,000 surgeons, I'm like, you know, earlier when nothing was working and, you know, I disappeared for a while and I came back and I sat on the stage, here's what was happening. I went back and I yelled at these guys. And then I came back and I felt into it and there was anger. And then I realized it was shame. And it was because I didn't want to let you guys down. And then how did that feel here? Like I'm worthless, which we all have those feelings. And you could see like 1,000 faces just going like, oh my God, are you like this? And these are surgeons. So they're repressing the shit all day. And so that was that event. So now fast forward to this, it's the same AV group. So like this past like trigger comes up. And so the mind is thinking, okay, this is fine. It'll work. It's no problem. Mind was actually calm. Body was shitting its pants. So they put me in a room. They put me in this room. They're like, here, you get just a quiet space. It's this huge conference room, totally empty. They're like, just marinate here for the 2 hours before your talk. And I'm like, great. So I'm just sitting there and the body is going ape shit. Like heart rate's like 120, pits are sweating. Like you feel that sense of panic in the body, but the mind was absolutely empty. So, and it was like, this was an avatar that was just going through some kind of shit. But there was enough understanding here that it was like, you know, but if the body continues to do this, because it's clearly got some trauma here, like from the last time or from years of speaking, years of feeling that unworthiness on stage, whatever it is, like it's gonna be harder to express on stage because the body is sending out all these alarm signals. And if you want to ignore the body, you can, but then you're not really present. You're not really connected. Like all this was kind of flashing. So I was like, okay, let me take a walk. So I walk through downtown Sacramento and I come back and then I go into the room and the audience starts coming in and the body emptied out the minute I talked to the first person in the audience who was like a fan, and we're doing selfies and all that. And they were just jumping up and down with joy. And it used to be, I would feel the unworthiness rise and be like, there's something wrong with this person that they're so happy to see me because I'm a piece of shit, you know? And instead, all I felt was total joy, like sympathetic joy. So that then arose, the body empties out. I go on stage and it was just pure presence. And the crazy thing that happened was the second song I did, in the middle of it, my mind is so empty, all the lyrics go bye-bye. And so suddenly I'm just like, the track is playing, nothing's happening. And so I walk over to the clicker and I turn, now, by the way, this has never happened to me, but if it had happened in the past, I would have shit the bed, panicked, like the body would have lit up. Body was empty, mind was empty. Turn the thing and I look at the audience, 1,000 people, and I'm like, hey, yeah, that was funny. Like all the lyrics just disappeared. Like mine was totally gone. Blank. Like I'm looking for a blank mind most of the time, but not when I'm on stage. Like, so they're laughing. I'm like, we got a couple choices. Like I could do it again. I can't promise you it's going to work. Or we can go to the next thing. And they're like, do it again. So I do it again. It works perfectly. And so it was just weird. You find yourself unable to be anything but fully authentic, like honest, because what else are you going to do? So then the thing unfolded in this really beautiful way. And I could feel the energy of these people who've been traumatized over the pandemic. They've gotten death threats, like all this stuff. And just the connection with the happening. It's just the happening of that room. There aren't 1,000 individuals there. It's the happening. And I tell you, if I compare that to even 2 years ago, I can't recognize what that experience is like. So there's no journey, there's no path, there's no unfolding, nothing's happening. And yet you can go in memory, which is happening just now, and go, oh, that's different. Like that's a change. So I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, it's fun. Because I think that's can be a common source of confusion. It's like, oh, like, oh, these things have happened. There's so much freedom, but whoa, this body is super triggered right now. Like, oh, wait, why am I so pissed off right now? This makes no sense. But it's such a common thing that these things that, there's a sense that like, yeah, the everyday stuff gets what we call deconditioned, at least in the community, we call it deconditioning. Like that happens pretty quickly if one is mindful or whatever. But then the more rare stuff, like being on stage in front of 1,000 people, when else, how often does that happen? And then it's like these triggers just kind of hit and it's like, oh, there we go.
That's beautifully expressed. That's exactly it. And the triggers just trigger the apparent conditioning that seems to arise all of a sudden. And it's just, if you, like you said, if you're mindful, you can actually see it. Sometimes the mindfulness is apparently not there and it just becomes you. And even if there isn't an identity owning it, it feels like the anger is everything in the universe. And so in a way, it even feels more intense or worse than when there's a person there holding it, because the person can put it at a little distance, can escape into some story about it. But when it's just anger and there's no explanation, there's not even a story, it's just, fucking, so I don't even know where this is. Like, I just want to fucking burn everything to the ground, like everything, like everything I built, everything I am, it needs to burn. Like it's that kind of rage that comes up. You really, applying a little mindfulness there is good, because the people around you can actually just be like, what the hell is that? And actually this arose just a few days ago for me, where there was this recital that my kids had to go to, this violin recital. And my wife said, yeah, I know. She is really beautiful, by the way. It happened yesterday. My wife is like, well, their cousin, is coming. He's this 22-year-old kid and he really wants to come to the recital. And I can't come because I'm on call. So you can take, this 20-some-year-old cousin and these two kids. Now, I'm feeling my youngest kid's anxiety because like you're just feeling everything around you. And so this kid is just a bundle of anxiety about this recital. And so she's stressed when she hears this cousin's coming, she's more stressed. And then I'm like, well, okay, so now I got to take this guy, I got to handle these two kids, sit through a 2.5-hour recital of screech, like the other, like, I don't know what this teacher is, but he just, like, my poor daughters and these poor kids, he tortures them with these very difficult pieces. So it's just like for 2.5 hours. And this kid tells me he wants to sit through it, but he really doesn't. He's being polite. That's what I'm feeling. So finally, like this is building up for a couple of weeks where I'm like, I really don't want to do this. There's a part that's just, I just don't want to do this. And so finally, like I'm having a bad day. Like I'd gotten a ticket that really wasn't fair, like for blocking an intersection because someone had decided to stop. So all this like anger is coming up and I don't really know what's up. And so we're sitting at dinner and the kids are stressed and I'm talking about the recital. And suddenly I was just like, you know what? I turned to my wife and I'm like, I don't fucking want to take this kid to this recital because it's a dumb fucking idea. Here's all the reasons why. I'm the one who has to do it and it's going to fucking suck and I'm not going to do it. Like, and I said it just like that. And I never, ever would talk to my wife like that, because if there's anger, I would just repress it because I kind of pedestalize her. So, and she's just like, what the fuck? So, and it used to be that she, before her big shift, she would just repress and try to be the peacemaker, Enneagram 9, if anybody knows the Enneagram, she's just the total peacemaker. And I'm a 6, so I'm just a fuck stick. And so, it's such a 6 thing too, to be like, yeah, we suck. 6s are the worst. She would have repressed it and kind of glossed it over and kind of stewed on it. Instead, she's like, well, you don't fucking have to be an asshole about it. And she gets up off the table and walks away. And the kids who have never seen this in their parents, this kind of behavior towards each other, were just like, they just got up and like ran away. They like just went to the like garage. I was like, holy shit. And so this kind of thing, like this is after like what awakenings and all this stuff and this really magical shit. And so we get back together, me and my wife, we're talking to each other and we're like spelling out like what it is that just happened. And both of us are like, you know, I thought we were like super intimate now and super honest and super authentic. And yet these things still arise that apparently we've been seething on. And we both realized, yeah, that's just how this shit goes. Like, and you know, a couple hours later, we were perfectly fine. And she said, you know, there's still enough me here to be really hurt when that kind of thing happens and it responds in this way. And the kids kind of realize the energy has shifted and they're just right back. But so it's this turbulent, crazy, like human unfolding that we're lying to ourselves if we're saying, oh, this is all like, you know, unicorns and rainbows. It's a, a beautiful tragedy as it unfolds.
Oh, I mean, hey, do we all know about this, right? Yeah, we do. The part that I love the most is when you talk about just putting it right out there. Like being able to be completely transparent and authentic, no matter what's going on, you know, even if you just shat your pants or sound like an idiot, right? Who the fuck cares what other people think of you anymore? Gone. Or not, that's not gone for everybody, but trust me, you'll get there. And B, just, you know, whatever is arising, that's it. It's perfect. You can't change it. Suffering happens when you want it to be different. That's all I have to say. I'm an Enneagram 2. I'm a caretaker.
Oh, I love the twos. That was so beautifully expressed. That's all that needs to be said actually ever. Actually, Patty.
We can go home now. Oh, wait, I am home. Okay.
Stop the recording. It's over.
Okay. Anybody want to throw their 2 cents in or ask something or you know, whatever. Jeff. Jeff and then Allie.
What's next for you? You know, a lot of folks are into fetter work or this or that. Do you have a plan or an intention going forward?
That's a beautiful question, because I would, you know, look at the fetters, try to sort of manhandle my way through some of that letting go, some of that unbinding. And what I found is every time I would try to do that, it just wouldn't work. It would feel like a kind of doing that was failing, is the best way I could describe it. And what I recently have come to understand for me, for here, is it's almost like the doing shows up as an epiphenomenon, like a correlation to the energetic unfolding that's already happening that you're not doing at all. And so if fetter work shows up, then it shows up and it'll just feel like the right thing to do, and I'll do it in some way. And this became very apparent over the last couple of months. It's like, oh, wow, I never could have tried to do what happened here, you know, where my wife basically tried to, you know, murder me with this piece of information that she'd been kind of repressing for a decade. And it comes out and it causes a kind of death. And that death was like all of a sudden all the fetters collapsed. Now they since kind of, the conditioning comes back. So it's a kind of a fluid thing. But if I had tried to sit and go, okay, reactivity, let's work on reactivity, or let's work on the self-center. And I think that can be very powerful work. And actually when I watch the videos, like say Angelo's done a video series on fetters, it's very powerful because you can feel it. You can go, oh, yes. But as far as like saying, okay, I'm going to now do this, it just hasn't shown up like that. It's kind of inexplicable. It just seems weirdly to unfold. And I'll say this, like Jeff, like so much of it now is felt to be, and this word is overused, and I don't think we can understand it mentally as well as we would like. It's energetic. So there's like this energetic contraction that forms around a lot of emotional repression or around certain conditioned patterns and so on. And it just feels like it starts to unbind. And the way that that feels is body, like energy flowing through the body. Or my wife will, like last night she did this, she'll just do this kind of thing. And she just intuitively knows how to do it. It's just ridiculous. And we'll just look, right here is this place that no one could ever touch me for like most of my life. I couldn't touch myself here. And now it's like, it feels like a nexus of energy. There's no other way to describe it. Like it's untied and opened. And I know there's traditions that talk about this heart chakra and untying the knots, and there's tantric ideas around it. I don't understand any of that. All I know is that it feels like there's an energetic opening and process that happens. And that may show up as you're that now find yourself doing fetter work, or you find yourself, like I find myself sitting less in meditation. I can't even call it meditation anymore. It's just suddenly I'll sit and feel the body drop from the head into this. And it's nobody's doing it. It just seems to happen. And then everything is just seeming to happen. And then suddenly you're contracted, you're driving your kids to school, and it's separate Zubin driving separate kids to a separate hellish experience of high school, that you're just remembering all the trauma of going through your own education. And so it's this very inexplicable kind of process. So I have no idea what's the next 5 minutes, let alone, 5 years.
So I assume it's the same for your family and your relationships, right? It's just whatever's unfolding, and no idea of what that will be.
Yes. And actually, I'll say this. Part of the reason there was a big shift for both my wife and I recently was that we both knew that the next minute or the next day, we could not be together. Like everything could absolutely fall apart, and it would be perfect no matter what. It was known. It was fine. In fact, it was almost like we gave each other permission to know that. Like, it's okay. There's all this taboo against feeling like everything is perfect, even if it's not what you want. And we both said we prefer it to not be that way. But if something happened and this is how it went, and that gives you full license to say anything. And so all the stuff comes up. Then you're just saying, that one time, this is what was really going on. Oh, I thought something might be there. Well, that one time this was going on. Kind of things that were said that would end a marriage in a typical contracted state were like these huge sources of opening. So the unpredictability, the absolute isness of what's happening becomes the primary thing. And even that becomes fluid. So sometimes it contracts, but that's how it's kind of been the last few months. And it's a beautiful thing. So then, there's no planning. There's no understanding of what's next.
Well, what you said is really beautiful, and it reminds me of the idea that you can't really start living until you've come to terms with death. And it sounds like what you're saying is the application of that idea to a relationship.
That was really beautifully said. That I feel that exactly right. It's so like my wife, the Enneagram 9, one of their primary fears is fear of annihilation. And she's had this all her life, fear of death, because death is annihilation of the self. It's gone, according to the mind. And so her primary block was this fear. She would step to the precipice of the void and get so terrified that she'd pull back. And so what we had was a kind of death of the relationship in a way, because she said things and I said things that were actually murderous to the idea of the perfect marriage or whatever. And that kind of death allowed then the looking at, well, then what is real? What is even this self that seems to want to live if everything can just disappear in that way? And so it's a crack to the dying before you die. And it feels energetic. You actually feel it as a kind of energetic dying process, like a falling away. So in the few days after her shift, it was just tears and tears and tears and tears and tears and grief and sadness and tears, like to the point where at one point the thought arose in here, I think we might have gone too far. This is like any physician would look at this and go, this is like a major depression with like, dangerous signs, but it wasn't. And then from that was this, she would say things like, there's no me here. Like I'm the pine tree and there's what's the distinction? It's just this. She would start walk around talking like a Zen master. She's has no intellectual background in this, has not meditated a day in her life. It was all this energetic opening, like what's the primary block? And for her, it was this fear of loss of the family, fear of death. And when those things were shown to be like, okay, well, here it is, that's when this kind of opening happened.
That's great. That's
Thanks so
great.
much.
Jeff, thank you, Jeff. Let's have Allie ask her question. Well spoken, Zubin. Are the imposter in there? Allie.
I was just going to mention, I love how your awakening and journey is happening within your family. That's happened here. My kids are basically the best. I mean, it seems like we crash into each other so much and the conditioning disappears. And we're very honest in our family too, to the point that we can make outsiders feel pretty uncomfortable. So, when my kids tell me, well, Mom, you're blah, blah, blah. And then everyone looks like, oh shit, what did he just say? And I'm like, oh, I feel that. Yeah. And they're like, how come she's not getting mad? That kind of thing. So it's, but yeah, my kids have really helped me with the deconditioning thing. And I love your wife. I have to say, I've watched part of the video of her and the young lady, I can't remember her name.
Suzanne.
Suzanne. Yeah. When I first saw your video with Angelo talking about your wife, I was like, wow, I want to see his wife. She sounds like so freaking cool. So anyway, thank you very much. And yeah, family can be a great way, even though there is still this urge to go to the cave sometimes. Like, why can't I just have a little apartment somewhere all by myself and I can go there when I need to? But that's not happening.
Allie, that's beautiful. Family is our best teacher. It's funny about the cave, like just the other day, and when with all this rage came up, my wife and I were talking, and I'm like, I'm going to be totally honest with you. Like, there are times when I just want to come here to the studio and just live here for like a week by myself. No kids, no wife, no nothing. It's just a compulsion. It just arises. And she's like, oh, I get it. Yeah, I totally get it. And one thing I wanted to add to what you said that I don't think is talked about enough. Maybe it is. I don't know. I'm maybe not savvy on it, but my wife, who's Chinese by descent, but American born, and Suzanne, who's Korean. So when I'd come back from a retreat a few months ago, I was very blown open, and my wife kind of let me have it. The minute I got back from retreat, she's like, you're all fucking sitting with a bunch of hippies doing whatever the shit you do. And I'm here being the program director at Stanford, managing these kids, and you come back saying, hey, everything's love and light. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's fucking shit and stool and crap. And I'm angry, and you need to know that, which was the first time she's really expressed that. She would lost her shit. And again, for Enneagram 9. So I was like, oh my God. So I it was a great, like, cause I was so open. I was like, this is so wonderful. Yes, of course you'd feel that way. I'm so sorry. I've been completely blind to it intentionally, because I know that you would smooth it over and you make it work. And so there's a part of me that's like, path of least resistance. And it's a total asshole 6 part of me. And so then I told her, there's this book about the Enneagram, the wisdom of the Enneagram. You just read chapter 9. And that actually set the stage for her understanding the conditioning, because she was skeptical. She's like, nah, this is fucking pop psychology. So she reads it and she's like, oh, this is me. Holy crap. Oh my God. And so then we're watching videos on YouTube because she's a little more open. She sees Angela's videos and she's like, I got to be honest. He doesn't connect with me. Like, the way that he expresses, it's just too wonky and intellectual. And I just can't get it. And so we keep scrolling. And this is when Suzanne's video shows up in the algorithm. So a few months ago, it just shows up. I'm like, who the hell is this? This like Asian girl, like sitting here in a cemetery and just talking. And we watch it together. And I immediately, like, I'm watching it going, oh my God, this person is so clear. Like this is like pointing from directly from reality. And Margaret watches it and goes, now her, I understand. And I was like, what? And the thing is, you can't like underestimate the cultural connection too. Like here she sees like this average Asian chick talking about this in a way that's very direct and plain, that speaks right to her own personality and sensibility. And she sees herself there and goes, oh, okay, this is a thing that can happen for me. And that was the first sort of crack. So then when Angelo interviewed Suzanne and then he messages me and she's like, he's like, you need to interview her. You need to have her come over. I don't know why. I'm not supposed to be there. You're just supposed to hang out. When she came, my wife was like, sure, that sounds great. Let's all hang out. And I was like, really? You want to hang out with this like, you know, weirdo non-dual person? She's like, sure. And that's what sort of started the whole thing unraveling. So it is this kind of like weird set of causes and conditions that come together, but recognizing there is like, oh, you know, like if you have a family and kids, then someone else with a family and kids who's pointing might make more sense to you, to the mind anyways, that then allows it to relax and see what's really there.
Yeah, a lot of what I'm hearing is the theme of a practice that is in resonance with where the being is at that moment, right? It's like there comes a point where it's like there's not a seeker, there's just like life or whatever it is seems to just lay these things out. And yeah, we do. I think a lot of folks here have found that, you know, all of a sudden one day, like a teacher or a practice will just kind of lock in and it'll be like, that is it. That's the thing to do. And I feel like I've heard it expressed so often that, yeah, just, I don't know why that happens, but it happens and it's awesome. So, yeah.
It's like the universe is waking itself up in a way and it just finds the way and we apparently get out of the way. Yeah, that was beautifully said. Like that's, you see it again and again, like every story is like, and then the teacher appeared and it was this, or it was my child, or it was tragedy, or it was, you know, something else that happens. You know, sometimes it's a psychedelic even, you know, it can be anything. It just shows up. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Beautiful. I think Kirk has his hand up.
I do have it. Hey, first time caller, long time listener. And what's interesting is that when I first came across you, I think maybe when maybe it was Hoffman's discussion or something. And so it really resonated from an intellectual standpoint. And what I really enjoy about your discussions is that you have a very wide bandwidth. And even your last one you dropped on Friday with Johnny B. Truant, man, that was like, there's a guy that, and if you haven't listened to it, it is definitely a great listen from the standpoint is that guy is a magical being itself, but I got the sense that he's just a little frustrated because he doesn't have what we call PNN, what Patty said was the persistent non-symbolic experience. So those that experience it, and Zoo, you would always say, in the discussion, you're like, you know, you'll know it when you know it. And it's, you know, it's one of those things that's very frustrating to those to try to explain to those that haven't experienced it, because, and especially someone like him, because he's so close and it's just like but the discussion you had was so magical on so many levels on talking about story. And this guy is just a magical being with storytelling. And so the thing that my question too is a couple, there's several questions here, but the first one is that you also discussed how you took psychedelics a couple of weeks ago. Hope I'm not outing you on that particular thing. But I think once you go into this space where then where everything is unexplainable, you have the what the fuck moment in your life, and then everything can in fact come into the space and go, oh, well, that kind of makes sense. And the mind isn't trying to pattern it, it's just is. And so if you can explain that, and I think the next thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is what's going to happen. The next person you're going to interview, or one of those, are Shamil with his Bayesian inferences, because once you have this what the fuck moment, then that's your hyper prior, and then everything filters off of that. So maybe you can talk a little bit about some of that stuff. And I probably blew a lot of people out with that. So,
man, Kirk, you are like my kind of motherfucker, man. That I love it. I love it. You see, it's sometimes, you know, it's funny, the personality, the conditioning loves to be seen. And I feel seen when you talk, because that interview with Johnny B was he's a friend, and you know, those interviews don't get a lot of engagement, but the engagement they get, it's like what you just said. It's like, oh, I see what that was. It was a guy struggling at the precipice of this unknowing, and he's trying to do it from a knowing place, and it can't be done. And so you watch that precipitation of you know, he understands that everything's a story, but he doesn't understand that there's no storyteller. He doesn't, not quite, because it's a kind of a unknowing. So getting back to the psychedelic question, yeah, it was just a few months ago, I did a psilocybin journey, first psychedelic I've done in a few years. And the last one I'd done was ayahuasca, and that was in like 2020, beginning right prior to the pandemic. And that, you know, each of these things is kind of it is seen in retrospect as necessary but not sufficient. Like a kind of the ayahuasca was a heart opener, like where suddenly I felt energetically blown open, and I had never experienced that, and that was beautiful, followed by retreats that did something similar, then a retreat that was really empty, like, oh, here's emptiness, and then a retreat that was just, oh, that pure consciousness experience. And so it all kind of builds. But then I did this psilocybin journey with a friend who lives and works up on Mount Tam, and he's very connected to that mountain in San Francisco. And, you know, we did a pretty high dose, but it felt seamless with reality, where this idea of wiping the priors away, like all our mind's conditioning, in Bayesian terms, it means that when we're doing the calculations, when the brain's trying to predict and create our world, it's using prior experience and probabilities, and then sense data to construct and predict our world. Well, what happens when the priors go to like nothing? Well, then that's a kind of what David Kars maybe calls unknowing. Suddenly everything that you thought was this is now just unknown, and then it's just this. So then with no priors, it's just this. So the mind is just shown, there's nothing to be shown, it's just what is. And so that's what that kind of experience was like, and that's what I was pointing to in that interview with Johnny. And the side note on that interview is, he had called me the week before. We hadn't talked in quite a while. And he's like, oh, just, you know, this terrible thing happened with my company, and this criminal thing, and there's all this fraud, and I'm, you know, is anyone looking for a ghostwriter, this kind of thing. And we just started talking, and we started talking about story. And I'm like, this sounds like a conversation we should have on the show. So again, the universe just kind of throws these little bits together. You can't even possibly plan to do things like that. And by the way, the last thing you mentioned was a Hoffman interview. That is the gateway for the intellect to understand the ununderstandable. It's like, oh, well, okay, well, here's an intellectual model for consciousness is everything. Okay, great. So now the intellect can kind of grasp on and go, okay. And then the further knowing is like, okay, even that's like a story that the dream tells to make sense of the dream. And what's even underneath that is just this. So simple. But you almost, like, people like you and I need that kind of crack in a way. I've gotten many messages from people saying that allowed my mind to go, oh, there's maybe something, like, if everything is consciousness, what is that? And the mind hits a wall because it can't be known. And then what's next is next.
The other thing that's interesting for me is that I love the conscious agent. So even though I have experienced PNSE, I like to play, because see, I'm not dealing with trauma. And so I get to play. And so that's the interesting thing, is that if you have that massive pointer and a patterning system where you don't go crazy, because if you go the other way and you really try to pattern at scale, and then you bring paradox in, you bring all these mental constructs in, but yet you've seen something that is the what the fuck, then you are not in delusion. And you can be in delusion if you believe that you're in delusion, but it's like, it doesn't matter. As a human, it doesn't matter, because I can literally get out of the body, the mind, and work at a cosmic level, and which is totally different, and play, and then, you know, and I have no agenda either. So that's the other thing. Usually when you have a patterning system, or you have the knowing, power seems to creep in a little bit, or can, but I'm like, no, that's not why. I'm just playing. I'm having fun. And that's why I think your talks are so resonant, is because you bring it back now. And this has only been like the discussion that you had with yourself, the two time where you're just riffing and you're just like, you're explaining the PNSE. That's the term, like you're just explaining it, and people are either going to get it, that you're because you were interesting that you're talking about fetters too, because you're so far out in the fetter thing. You were explaining, I don't know, it was maybe fetter 8 or fetter. I'm like, oh man, that guy is way out. So it just, I just totally enjoy it. Keep doing what you're doing, and that's it.
Oh, thank you, brother. Thank you.
Oh man, Kirk's energy is it's just amazing. Thank you, Kirk. Back to Jeff.
So you mentioned Hoffman, but if you're looking for a really great story, in the scientific materialist philosophy kind of thing, then heartily recommend Yasha Bach. I don't know if you've come across that name.
No.
But he's a computer scientist. He's obviously awake. He's very brilliant at constructing these models of the mind that are quite compatible with the view from experience. So there you go.
Beautiful. I'll check it out.
Will you write it in the chat, Jeff?
It is the best thing about the chat, is that we can all give our recommendations and links and etc.
So, I reached out to David Kars, or I tried to reach out. Amy, didn't one of us reach out to David Kars?
Yeah, I think so.
And gone somewhere in Vermont.
Yeah.
Doing his carpentry or whatever.
The way that he writes, I'd almost worry if he wasn't gone. I'd be like, oh, he's going down it's so easy. This is something, okay, I'm just going to say something for a second that has occurred to me, that people who have deep realization, it seems, it's clear by the way they express, you can feel it energetically, is like, oh, it's like Jeff said earlier, like, this person is clearly awake. So how can you know that when, there's no persons and there's no awake? And there's an energetic kind of it's not a transmission even, it's just like a kind of a feeling you get that they're pointing from where that is, which is nowhere. And Kars is like that, but you see a lot of people who do that, and then over time their teaching kind of evolves to make so many sort of apparent compromises to the mind that it's almost unrecognizable. And then you hear about, malfeasance and power abuse and all the other stuff that happens. So this seems to be a common trap. And in the age of YouTube, I can tell you, I'm very happy for myself here that I kind of did my YouTube thing a lot before all of this kind of shifting really hit, because I kind of know what that space is. I know the traps. I know how addictive it is. I know how the mind loves the validation of the love and focuses on the negative and tries to make a thing of it. And there's all this parasocial projection that people put on you, that they think they know you. And there's all this secondary gain that you can get from it. And this internalized capitalism that happens where you're trying to, and so in that space, if David Kars were to get sucked into social media somehow, I wonder whether that residual human conditioning would get hijacked in a way. And it's just something that I wonder about, since it's so fluid here. There's still so much contraction that it's so clear that can happen. Now, maybe for David, because he, clearly from his writing, it's like, shit, perfect, brilliant stillness. Like, I don't know how to say it better than that. He's well beyond that, such that he doesn't even want to teach. But it is interesting how these things show up. And again, I'm speaking kind of from like the type of person who communicates the stuff. Like, it's almost like, oh, talking shop about it. Why would David not teach? It's like, oh, because, So yeah, sorry. That was self-indulgent for a no self.
Maybe he's like an Enneagram 5 and just likes to hide away in his cave.
Yes. He just wants to master the universe and just keep it to himself. That's it. Yeah.
Amy? We've got
This
a
is
lot
speaking
of
as a
fives here.
5, so and I know the tendency very well to be like, why talk to anyone? Just
The guy who created this community with me in the beginning was a 5 and went to his cave for real.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, what we didn't know is that he had a glioblastoma growing. He didn't know it either until he did. Yeah. Who's up? Who's next? Who wants this opportunity?
yes, questions, things to share, anything. This would be wonderful. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a fascinating topic. Is just that process of awakening as a couple. I think that is just so, because I know and suspect that so many people here are part of a couple and part of the awakening process. So it just seems like a endless topic.
Yeah, you know, that whole thing is so interesting because it's a kind of a grace that it happens, but it's also seen clearly that it doesn't need to happen. It's not something that is necessary for whatever. But it showed up here. But even then, it's like, it's how do I say this? I might have said this when Angelo interviewed me about this, but it was in the relative sense, like as a person, the greatest thing that could happen to the spiritual seeker would be that the wife or the spouse, the partner, suddenly becomes as interested in what you're passionate about and as seeky as you. So in a way, it's like, it's a kind of the perfect validation, and it's the perfect, okay, now my best friend and partner is also a co-seeker. Like, how wonderful. What's strange is none of that was felt on either side. It was more, oh, of course, this is exactly how this would express. This is the next expression. And yeah, it's lovely and all that, but none of it matters. Like, it's just exactly as it is. And that's kind of just known, which was a huge relief, because I think it would be very easy, especially here, this personality, this 6 that's always looking for support outside, is always looking for the person that can tell them what to think or what to believe or validate their own belief structure. You're spending your whole life building this network of trusted people that you're fiercely loyal to because you don't trust yourself in that way. It would have totally co-opted this, and I would have been like, this is great. Now I have this wife. We're going to go on retreat. We're going to do all these things. And, we'll put the kids in a boarding school and we'll just go and fucking go to the Himalayas. It's like, instead, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is nice. So at night we lay in bed and move energy around spontaneously, or whatever's happening is happening. And so it just is going to show up for you as it shows up. There's really nothing to do. There's nobody doing it. And the minute that's kind of like relinquished, then what shows up is seen as exactly right. So that was something that I wanted to say in the video too, is just like, don't like, if you're a couple, there was a lot of like people emailing me saying, hey, I'm really jealous. Can I see the full video? I'm like, oh, jealous. No, you don't want to be jealous of this. First of all, I didn't tell you the anger story where we're yelling at each other for the first time in 20 years of marriage. And so yeah, just put that out there.
How are the kids adjusting to that? Because I would imagine that they've seen they've seen your arc, right? So they have to first see that, and then they'll go, well, at least mom is sane. And then they see mom go off the deep end, and they're like, holy, we're fucked. We're absolutely fucked. And because I'm saying that in jest, but it's different, and it's generational too, because they're dealing with their own stuff too. And so it's got to be fascinating for them. And so that would be an interesting.
That's a great question. And after the shift initially happened, for the couple weeks, she was on sabbatical, and then we went on a vacation to LA. So the kids were with us all the time out of school, and they would say things like, why did you guruify mom? Because that's what they call me. They're like, oh, Mr. Guru over here. Because sometimes at dinner, I'll say shit like, why are you anxious? Just anxiety's arising. There's no you that it's, and they're just like, fuck off, dad. Like, you don't know me, which is true. And so then mom starts just, staring at the wall, and we'll just be sitting there crying, or we'll she and I will just be sitting on the couch holding hands and eye gazing. And the kids are like, what the fuck? Like, oh, you gurufied mom. She was the last bastion of practical wisdom, helps us with the homework, like tells us it's important to do violin and important to care about math and science. Whereas I'm like, math, science, dude, let me tell you, I cared about that stuff. Look where it got me, bald and alone. I mean, just joking, but like, it's like that. So, but there is a clear energetic shift in how they are. So they crawl into bed with us again. They're like, and this is like a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old. They're open and telling us things that they wouldn't normally say. So they respond at an energetic level. And like my oldest now is telling me things like, Dad, I don't know what to do about my friends. They all have all this existential angst. They think everything's socially constructed and they don't want to play the game anymore. And their parents are pushing them and all of this. And I don't know what to tell them and I was like, well, what do you think? And she's like, of course it's all constructed. Like the whole thing is constructed. So what? Why wouldn't you, as you say, Kirk, like, why wouldn't you just go play? Like, enjoy it, live the life, play the game. Why not? And I'm like, you're wiser than I was by far at that age. And then I'll just tell her, well, why would you want to change them? Let them just, you express you. And if it rubs off, great. And if not, that's great too. Like they'll find everybody's finding it as it goes. So those kind of things do shift. And it is nice then to have two parents who are expressing differently too, different aspects of this non-thing. So yeah, I'm happy for my kids. Actually, I really am. Like, it's beautiful to see that, they can experience that. And I, in a way, then I become a little jealous. I'm like, man, if I were raised by parents that weren't so mind identified, bless their hearts, and they still are. And so during that trip, we went and saw my parents in Clovis, California, Central Valley. Oh God, the whole saying, like, you think you're awake, spend a week with your parents. I spent a day with my parents, and it was so clear that contraction is real. But it's different now. So both my wife and I, so my wife, usually my mom, who's this anxious, neurotic, like a Jewish mom, she's an Indian mom. She's just like a mile a minute of all the anxieties, and the world is, and this and Trump and Biden and this. And so we go, and now we're like blown wide open, and we're sitting there, and she's just this energetic ball of like neurosis. And my wife told me, at one point, she was just screaming inside. Like my wife just had this inner scream because my mom's energy was felt so unabashed, and I was feeling it too. And so at one point I was just calmly listening. And then at one point the conditioning just arose, and I was like, maybe you guys should just fucking move out of this shit town where you have a million complaints and you're wondering why people are so fucking stupid and say inappropriate things to you and they're all a bunch of racists. Maybe you live in a shithole. Have you thought about, like, it just came out. And then immediately I realized, I was like, holy shit, what was that? And my mom was even like, what was that? Again, that like kind of like unadulterated authenticity. And then I realized I don't even believe that. Like, that's not even true. Like, this place is as good as any. Like, I grew up here. I actually love this place. Like, and then I kind of calmed down and I could see, oh, this is what was happening. And you realize the deepest human conditioning is right there in your family. It's the deepest. And it's a teacher all the time. So yeah, I'm actually grateful for it, as painful as it is.
Sam Harris has talks here and there about his kids and what the experience was like. And he and his wife, both awake, dealing with their kids. That's always lovely. I also love Rupert Spira, who's really one of my favorite gurus, who's got a son, I guess he must be in college now, who wants nothing to do with any of this whatsoever. I have one kid who, he's the reason I even got into this thing. He spent his 25th birthday sitting under the Bodhi tree in India. And then my other son is, he's a farmer.
That's so beautiful. So beautiful. I love it. The human expression is just, it is friends, family. Sometimes if you're a hardcore 5 and you want to live in a cave, then it's living in the cave, that shows up in so many beautiful ways. And I think in some spiritual circles, there's an aversion to our humanness. There's a feeling of, like, whether it's spiritual bypass or whether it's embracing this voidness or the, pure consciousness experience to the exclusion of the embodiment aspects of it. And that was something that I had actually sought, was escape from the body, escape from this samsaric appearance. And then now it's quite apparent, no, this is it. This is all it. It's all one, not two thing, no thing, impossible to talk about, and yet so radiantly obvious in this moment that it's always and already just been this expression eternally. Why wouldn't it show up as all of this? And why wouldn't you just feel it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Yeah, what comes to mind is, like the expression of, suddenly bursting out and say, well, why don't you move out of this terrible town or whatever, right? It's like, but that part is so beautiful, right? Because even though it's expressing in this potentially socially inappropriate way, perhaps, who knows? But it's just like the intention, though, it intends. It's like, oh, I want to protect mom, right? She's expressing all this suffering, so it's like, oh, this part arises. It's like, oh, it's such a beautiful human part, that I feel like maybe it's not so much celebrated all the time, but it's like, yeah, that's like that intention behind it, whatever that is, wherever it's coming from, which is actually from nowhere, right? But it's like, it's just so gorgeous. I don't know. I just like, it always like warms this little spot here whenever I hear that. So thank you.
Amy, I just can't believe you're a doctor. I really can't. You're just too wonderful. and I say this.
She is. She's wonderful. She's the best.
She really is. You're just radiant. And I got to say, like, when I say that about doctors, in a way, I'm being tongue in cheek, definitely. But like physicians, and Angelo talks about this too, have very refined ego structures. So we've been told over our lives that, you're good, you're smart, you're wonderful, you're helping people, so on. And so we actually polish our egos into a delicious shine. And so we can kind of be very fluid and go with things until there's a certain limit that's reached when someone's pointing right at reality. And often that's when the doctors get the most vicious. They will just shut you down because you're threatening their entire worldview. And it can just collapse. And what you said about the beauty of even these expressions, it's absolutely true. These are all innocent, and the underlying intention is it's the pattern conditioning of the organism trying to keep the organism and the ones it loves safe and happy. And just because that may not be the path to safety and happiness, the intention underneath that energy is there. So you can love and accept all the energies, all the emotions, everything is innocent, as actually even beyond innocent, as well-intentioned. When you have road rage, you're trying to keep your boundaries protected or protect, your sense of safety or whatever, the family in the car or whatever, or your sense of control. Like you want to have control over the environment because otherwise at any moment you're gone. So of course the organism would behave in this way. That doesn't mean you accept maladaptive behavior. It just means that you accept what's arising, and then the next thing may be, that's not so conducive to long-term compassionate behavior or the suffering of conscious entities, myself included. And then a little meta, and it relaxes maybe.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for here, that's been kind of the key to like not having those things stick around so hard, right? Like when that reaction arises, it's like, instead of being like, oh, why is that? Why did that come up? Oh my God, that's not me, quote unquote, anymore. I'm so awakened and amazing. And no, it's actually just like, oh no, that's just like such a beautiful human expression. And like, just like honoring that, means maybe it doesn't, arise in such a way, or maybe it doesn't, who knows? And it's just having that ease with it is just so wonderful.
That's beautifully said, because if you go into it going, oh, if I just let it arise, it won't arise again, then you're trying to do something. Yeah. But like you said, hey, maybe it does. But the truth is, like between you and me and the wall, like the more accepting we are of these energies, the more they pass through. I think Suzanne said this in a video once. She said, these energies arise not to be believed, but to just express and pass through and to be released. And so you don't have to cling to it. You don't have to repress, deny, or accept it. You just, believe it. You just have to let it be. And even that you don't have to do. You don't have to do anything, because all of it's the perfect expression. Yeah.
Exactly. Just the way it is. No beliefs anyway. Yeah. How about Nigel? Nigel. You have to unmute though, sweetie.
Yeah, it always takes me a little while to get there. Yeah, it's been great that your talk so far, what you've been talking about. And I just wanted to say that I really resonate with the kind of energetic feeling of things, because that seems to be how it shows up here as well. And also the part about the partner, going on, being on the same journey. I mean, that's the situation here. I'm very fortunate that we're both going on the same journey, and it's very intense as well. And of course, it's always unique, but here it's like quite noticeable that there's a very different quality, a different flavor between us. My partner's very creative, etc., and I don't know what I am. I'm whatever, and that was her. But my question was, how does that show up with you two? Is there kind of a marked difference in the way it expresses, or is it very similar?
Oh, that's a beautiful question, because you're going through it as well. And I would say that it's different and yet the same. And it's a kind of paradox. Like the way she expresses is, and this came up early after her shift, because we would take these long walks. And you guys by now already know what this is like. Have you noticed? Just constantly trying to verbally express the inexpressible and trying to find clever ways to point at it, and constantly just yap, 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 yap. And the truth is, I'm not even thinking about what I'm saying. It's coming out of nothing, but it is expressing in that way. But then she's just silent, and she'll say 3 words and it'll point right at reality. And sometimes she'll just turn to me and put her fingers on my lips like this, like, shush. She's like, I can feel you're just here, and just let it be for a second. And in the old days, that would have triggered me, because I'm like, hey, you don't tell me to shush. Like, I'm just hey, at least I have, a expressive personality now. And it's just like, thank you. And then that energy infuses that. And so, yeah, it's very different. And her primary expression still is around this fear of annihilation. So she expresses emotionally as a lot of grief and falling away and sadness, because there's the knowing deeply that the children aren't real in the way that she thought, that the mind put it together. And for her, the children came from her, like they were and me too, like we're all enmeshed. She has that sort of feminine aspect of enmeshment, like I am these people. And when it was clear to her, the knowing was clear that none of that was actually what she thought, the grief, the intense sadness of that was just coming through and coming through and coming through and coming through. And it was just allowed. And so that still shows up. Like just the other night, just yesterday, she told me, yeah, last night I woke up with a lot of fear of annihilation again, a lot of this like fear of ultimate loss. And I just sat with it, So her expression is very different. Whereas for me, it's not annihilation. It's, in a way, it's a kind of annihilation. It's a loss of the world as I know it. It's a similar thing, but I don't fear nothingness. I fear the mind fears this end of Zubin as a going concern in a way. And so when that relaxes, it's like, oh, it doesn't matter. There never was a Zubin. And then the laughter just comes out. You just start laughing uncontrolled. This is a problem, by the way. I don't know if this happens to you, Amy or Patty, but like, you'll just be sitting around and suddenly just be like, she's fucking, and just sit back and go. And people are like, what's so funny? I'm like, that's just it. The whole thing, the entire appearance is hilarious. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question. But that's how it's experienced here.
Yeah, that's really beautiful what you're commenting. And I guess here at the moment I'm more the silent one. I mean, just at this point, I never know what's going to happen down the road. I don't think many of us do really, or any of us perhaps. And I really loved what you said about the children, your wife's perception of the children. That's really interesting. I've never heard that expressed before. Yeah. That's quite interesting. We don't have children, so doesn't come up here. But yeah, that's quite a deep thing that you put there. I have to think about that. Thanks very much indeed, Dave.
Oh, thank you. You know, you had me think about it again. It's like the deepest attachment for her. So everybody has their attachments, and for her, it's that. And what I realize now is even prior to her shift, she would say things to me because I'd be like, she'd be like, why are you seeking? Why are you doing this? I'm like, well, because there's so much, there's so much suffering and I'm in my mind all the time. And I find it very unsatisfying, very, even though I have everything materially that I could want, I'm very unhappy. And she would take that very personally. She'd say, you have the children, you have me, what's to want? Like, we have all this. And I'm like, well, it's not experienced that way, as these things are mine and they make things okay. They can't, nothing can. And then she would say, well, you've never given birth. Like, you don't know what that's like when this human comes from you through this pain and torture. And, and she had a very difficult first childbirth. And so I feel like that was a big shift for me, where now all the meaning is right there, but now all the meaning of being lost is this existential dread. And so she would express like that. And I didn't fully understand it at the time. And now I think it's much more clear.
I think, part of it is your kids are still so young.
Mm.
My kids are 40 and 45. So they've been gone for a long time, where there's no sense of that kind of attachment. There's not any attachment anywhere. But anyway, sorry, Nigel.
No, I just as you're talking about the children, I was remember what you said earlier about the falling into bed with you, and I was just thinking, I mean, what's really going on there? Well, you obviously have a much clearer idea than I do. Energetically, what's undoing there, and what an opportunity. I mean, it'd be very interesting to see how that goes. Just like where will that go? But I mean, such a freeing for them, such an opportunity. So I mean, I see it's a wonderful gift that you've given them. In whatever sense you wish to kind of view it. So wonderful. Thanks again.
Oh, thank you, Nigel. It feels like it's just happening. So, but I'd say one other thing with that, I'm as curious as you are to see what happens. But what is weird, and this is going to sound, again, from the human standpoint, it's going to sound not right. And I told my wife this, and she has an aspect of it, but not as strong as I do. I see them as entirely, they're not mine at all. There's no mine at all. And they're just expressions. And so it's weird. Like, I have deep paternal love for them, but I also at the same time see it as, like what Patty's pointing at. It's almost like they're 45 years old and out of the house. Like, I don't feel deeply invested in what they're doing in the way that I want to control it, or I see it as part of me or whatever. It's very interesting. And that's a change, actually, from when I was younger and they were younger. And the other thing I would say is the energetics of the whole thing are really fascinating. They're inexplicable. So the youngest daughter has got to do this violin rehearsal. She had a cold. She was super stressed. Like, her anxiety is so transmissible, because she just has the personality type. I think she may be a 6 like me, just high fear, high anxiety, overthinking all the time. And so she really responds to touch in a way. So yesterday morning, right before the recital, I almost thought she wasn't gonna be able to go through with it. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna try something. Like, let Daddy just put his fingers on your back. And I'm going to move energy around. I told her this, I kind of like set this intention. I'm going to move energy around that's going to balance you out. So when you perform, all that anxiety is going to actually be energy that helps you perform. So a little placebo setting the tone. And then I felt along her spine until I felt whatever it was. And I just kept it there. And we were silent for a good 5 minutes. She's standing and I'm just putting finger on the back. And after that, she was calm and she just crushed the recital. And now I'm not attributing it to that, but there's some kind of energetic thing that happens. And kids are so open in a way before they really close down, that, I guess if you have children, it's always worth kind of playing around with it because it just, and it feels naturally like, oh, okay, yeah, what is this? And she didn't, it wasn't she like, oh, you did some magic on me. She was just like, I'm going to let dad do his weird shit. And it just kind of went as it went.
I've just got to say that's wonderful. That just turned into healing. I mean, I've had that phase, and so I kind of understand that a bit. And what you were saying about, the parental not caring almost, it came up here, and I had to express it. Freedom. You're giving them freedom because that's what more can you say?
Beautiful, beautiful. I bet Ann Renner's going to speak to this.
Yes, it did move me to raise my hand. So I'm just so happy you're here talking with us. I really am. I mean, a friend of mine sent me a quick email 2 days ago and said, hey, I know you like ZDogg. He's coming to talk to POK. I went, oh, I will definitely go check him out. I haven't watched a huge number of your videos, but I've been watching them over a number of years, and it's just been, I don't know, it's been so heartwarming to participate, even in that remote way, to your extraordinarily authentic transformation. And the way you embraced yourself, even though you say you don't, in some interesting way, you have been such a complete expression of yourself in the moment at each stage. It's very endearing. And yes, anyway, thank you. I really appreciate you as a human being, and of course also as a non-human being if you want, but I think I mostly appreciate you in your human form. You're this gorgeous and unique expression of what we all are. Anyway, but about kids, yes, any of us who have kids are, well, they certainly were for me, this, I don't want to say this measure, but this mirror to me of who and how I moved in the world at different times of my integrating this essence that we are. I so understand your wife's reaction. I did not experience it that way, but it's a tremendous loss to a mother to lose her children. I lost my children. I have two sons who are these incredible bright lights in my life and who I adore beyond any other being on the planet. But when I was first knocked awake after doing this bliss thing for a while, they weren't special to me. I did not feel maternal love. I felt great love, but I felt great love for every expression of human beings, right? And I didn't tell them this because I had this sense that might not be the smartest thing for a mom to do, to say, honeys, I really love you, but I don't love you any more than Joey down the street, or, those kids across the world. You're all the same to me, uniquely, perfectly the same. What has been wonderful to me about living from non-self is it has given me more and more freedom to embrace self and my unique personality, the way I express that non-self. I really like my ego. I like it more and more. I do, because it's just a voice. It doesn't control, it doesn't demand. And even when it does demand, it's like, oh, there's my ego demanding, isn't that funny? But at one point I went, oh, I want to love my children as special beings again. It was just one of those arisings, right? And like you say, ZDoggMD, about how you move perhaps to different practices They arise, they present themselves. And I went, oh, that's where I'm going. I am re-embodying as fully and completely as possible. I am going to love these children as my children. It took me years, but now I do. And it makes my human life just so much richer, so much more enjoyable, so much more, well, I'll say beautiful, because to me, it is beautiful to have this incredible bond, this unique bond with specific people. And so now I do it with a whole bunch of people. It's not just my children. That taught me how to connect in a more special, unique, grateful way, if you would, to other unique expressions of our divinity in human form. So anyway, thank you for being here. I really have loved it.
I want to move in with Anne. What a beautiful being. Oh my gosh.
I knew it. I knew it. I knew it.
You're right, Patty. Anne, thank you. I feel like I've just taken a PhD course in embodiment and unfolding and acceptance. And this is something I've been struggling with and my wife too, is what happens when you realize the absolute. It's exactly as you say. It's like, well, these kids are no different than this rock in a way, because it's all the radiant perfection of this, and there's no separation. So what's to this? But then it just arises. And you started by talking about these wonderful, wonderful observations about this, which just a little while ago would have made me very uncomfortable and squirmy. And instead I reflected and said, yeah, that's how this shows up. And I think that's what earlier I said, there's a fear of loss. There's a fear that somehow that aspect that I do enjoy of the embodiment, like the Zubin character, is kind of sometimes a hoot. And, oh, he makes these funny music videos. Like, does that have to be relegated to the bin of everything is the same? And there's a terrible kind of a grief there. So it's like, well, maybe it has to be let go, but then re-loved the way Anne re-loves her human incarnation, loves her children as special, inhabits the human form with such a radiance that others around are just naturally just going, oh yes, who is this? And it's just absolutely perfect. And that gets back right to the beginning. Now I'm thinking about when I was saying, I notice these teachers over time, they start to get more compromising and, giving into the mind. And it's like, or is it arising that they're embracing the humanness of the expression and speaking to it? And so I don't know, but it's beautiful. Thank you so much. Wow.
Really good. Really, really good. I think it is what you describe. It's a kind of I don't know. None of these words make sense, but it's a going somewhere. Things change, and then there's somehow a reintegration or coming back. Things change again, and then it's whatever is just great. Do I love my kids a lot? Oh, you bet the fuck I do, and my grandkids and everybody in this room. I love all your beautiful faces. Oh my God, you know
Beautiful.
that, right? Yeah. Zubin, thank you so much.
But Patty, what's underneath that?
Perfect, brilliant stillness, Gary.
There's some identity there, Patty.
Well, why not? Are we out of time? Are we good? I have to pee. That may be what's driving it here, but
what's underneath it is her bladder.
Let's honor and accept Patty's having to pee. I'm open to that.
But at the same time, I don't want you to leave, Zubin. Seriously, I think you're so wonderful.
Patty, I told my wife I'd take a hike with her later this morning, so I probably should. But yeah. I wanted to say, Patty, first of all, I'm so grateful to you guys. Like, I feel like I've learned, even at the energetic level so much from being with this amazing, like, this is nuts. You guys are, because when Patty emailed me, I'm like, well, I don't know who these guys are. And so I emailed Angelo and I'm like, Angelo, you talk for these guys, like, give me the lowdown. And he's like, do it. That's all he said. He's like, they're great. They're great. I'm like, okay, done. I've learned to trust unconditionally Angelo. And I'm so glad that you guys invited me. And the last thing I want to say about what you pointed to just now is it is like Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, this whole thing. It's like you start in this kind of like, oh, mind identified, and you go on this journey and the seeking and all that. And there's death and rebirth and atonement with the Father, and then the return home to embody it, you know. And this recapitulates in Zen, in the, you know, ox herding pictures, where, you know, the last ox herding picture is the dude comes back into the market and he's just like, let's hang out, fam. And that's really it. That's really the story of the unfolding.
Right. Exactly.
It seems. Yeah.
It is. First there is a mountain. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Come back. Maybe you'll bring Margaret. Who knows?
Yes.
Yes.
Would that
please
be
bring
fun,
your
huh?
wife.
Yeah.
Please bring your wife here.
She'll be super resistant because she'll say, I have nothing to say about this. But as things unfold, that might change. And I think that would be, I would enjoy that, because I would love to have that dialogue with all of us together.
Bring the kids. We want to see the kids.
Now you're talking.
And they are. Just tell her she doesn't have to say a word. She doesn't have to say a word.
We
can all just sit here.
Just feel her. We'll just feel
It'd be awesome.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And if I bring my kids, you two will see two of the biggest little assholes on the planet, because they learned it from watching Dad. Yeah.
That's right.
Hey, they'll be right at home.
All right. I'm stopping the recording. Thank you, everybody, for coming and being. I'll just end it with that.
Thank you so much.
See you around. Amy. Say something again.
Oh, I was just going to say, yes, thank you so much, Zubin. This has been so much fun. Thank you for, spending time with us. And thank you, everyone, for showing up. This has been absolutely